My name is Jacobus du Plessis. I'm an associate at White and Case in the energy and infrastructure practice in Singapore. I'm a lawyer by trade, and essentially we do project financing of all manner of energy projects, renewables, oil and gas assets, thermal power plants, and so on.
Interesting. Thank you very much. And how did you end up studying LLB in Hong Kong?
It's a bit of a long story. I'm from South Africa, as probably people who've heard a South African accent before might be able to
Yeah.
tell. In my last year of schooling in South Africa, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to study law, but I wanted to study English common law. So
Mhm.
English common law, just for background, allows you to sort of practice in a variety of jurisdictions because a lot of the big economic powers out there in the world use English law as a legal system, from America to the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Singapore, etc. Everyone has a common
Yeah.
base of English common law. So I wanted to study English common law so I could become more international and sort of do what I'm doing now. And when you want to study English common law, the obvious options are there. You go to the UK, maybe the University of Aberdeen, or
Mhm.
you go to Australia, or those are the obvious options. At that time, in about 2010 or 11, China was really the topic of the day, and it was just after the Beijing Olympics, and
Mhm.
China was growing at a very fast rate. Um, I had gone to Hong Kong for a family holiday, and just got out there and thought, wow, what an amazing place. And and coincidentally, Hong Kong was a UK colony until 1997, so they had basically the same legal system as you have in
Mhm.
England and Wales, almost exactly the same. So going to do my LLB in Hong Kong at the City University of Hong Kong was pretty much similar to doing it in the UK, but at that point in time, I thought Hong Kong would be a lot more of an interesting adventure and a bit more of an interesting story going forward. So that's how I ended up in Hong Kong.
Interesting. And why did you decide to do your master's in Aberdeen later on?
So as I went through my career, so I did law at in Hong Kong, but then started working in the energy and infrastructure space. And the energy field is a very broad field, and includes oil and gas, renewables, and all these and everything in between. But as you sort of progress in your career as a lawyer, you realize that the commercial understanding, or the actual financial commercial understanding of what your clients do, is extremely important in order to be able to give them good legal advice.
Yeah.
So as I got more senior, I realized that I was lacking slightly on the financial and economics and commercial understanding.
Hmm.
And the MSc program at Aberdeen was a really good opportunity to do that remotely while working.
Hmm.
So the MSc program covered various principles of project finance and oil and gas and similar industries, and really gave me the sort of theoretical background to what my clients do. So that's how I ended up doing the MSc.
That's very interesting. And your career has taken you across multiple jurisdictions, including Asia, Africa, and Middle East. How these diverse experiences shape your legal and strategic insight in energy transactions?
Um, yes, it's a big question. So for background, I've worked in Myanmar, Burma, Laos, Singapore, Japan, in all these jurisdictions in Asia, servicing clients who are working either in these jurisdictions directly or using them as an sort of a jump off board for going into jurisdictions next door. So that, in my case, depending on who the client is, can be anywhere in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. It can be in the Pacific Islands, in Papua New Guinea, or in Japan. Or if the Japanese clients are investing in the Middle East, it can be in Abu Dhabi. It can even be in Scotland. So that that exposure that you get to different markets kind of tells you that, let's say superficially, a lot of these markets look very different to us from the outside. But once you get acquainted with the way that things work from a financing perspective, etc., you realize that, for example, markets in Asia, Africa, Middle East and even Europe often have more in common than they have different. So I mean, how do these experiences shape my legal advice and insights? I mean, it's really that it's realizing that the challenges that come up in a project financing or a project development, you know, they don't get any more or less complex just because the country is more or less developed. In fact, in very developed markets like Taiwan or Scotland, you can often find things to be just as hard or if not harder than developing a project in Indonesia, for example.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. And what were some of the key moments, like milestones, that led you to your current role as an associate at White and Chase?
Um, I think, but you know, this is probably something very relevant, I think, to students who are getting to that end point in their studies where they have to make a career decision and choose where they're going to go from here. What you'll find is that when you get to your third or fourth year,
Hmm.
everyone starts gunning more or less for the same jobs, for the same opportunities. If you're in a legal track, everyone's going for the same law firms. If you're in a finance track, everyone's trying to go to the banks.
Yeah.
You find a lot of competition here, almost like a choke point at this point. And what happened to me when I was in my final year of university was that because I was in Hong Kong and because Chinese was the main sort of requirement to get a good legal job in Hong Kong at that point in time, I wasn't able to get into a firm like White and Case at that point in time. So I had to take a very roundabout way. I had to go step off of the main track and take a job in a country like Myanmar that
Yeah.
there wasn't people fighting over to get into.
Hmm.
And by taking that road that's maybe a little bit less direct, you can often still end up where you wanted to go, but just the other way, just a longer way around.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about what is a key point in my career journey to get to where I am now. You know, White and Case is one of the world's global, power law, powerhouses, energy law powerhouses. So to get to this point, I had to take a very roundabout way, and I think if I had to think about, how that does that apply to people in general, I would really say that, as you get to this point where you have to make a choice about doing your first job or where you're going to go work, don't think so much about the brand name, whatever. Think more about whether, you're going to an area of work that you're really interested in. And if you're really interested in it and you enjoy it, I mean, you will end up where you should be at the end of the day. Instead of chasing after the brand name and maybe making suboptimal career decisions in the process.
Very interesting, thank you. And what were the biggest challenges in navigating energy regulations across multiple Asia Pacific countries?
Um, I think you can imagine, of course, that in a place like Asia Pacific, there are many, many different countries, different languages, different cultures, different legal systems.
Yeah.
Just in mainland Southeast Asia, you've got Vietnam and Cambodia that had a French legal system that was subsequently influenced by a communist system. So that looks very specific. And then you have the Thai legal system,
Hmm.
which was historically based off of the German legal system and then influenced by the Japanese one. So it looks very different over time. And then Burma still has legal acts from the 1800s, from when they were
Hmm.
still a colony
Yeah.
of the UK. Um, so how are these markets different? I mean, the answer is simple. They're very different. But ultimately, when it comes to sort of doing international energy work, we rely very heavily on local counsel and local law firms to guide us through the process.
Hmm.
We know what we need from an international perspective, what the banks need from an international
Hmm.
perspective, what our clients need from an international perspective. And it's often a situation of working very closely with local law firms, telling them what we need, and then sort of translating it from Vietnamese or from Cambodian or from Indonesian into the international standards that
Yeah.
we need. So it's a bit of an iterative process, but it's certainly an interesting one.
Interesting. And well, the global energy transition is accelerating. And what trends do you see shaping the future of that area?
Um, so over the last, I would say maybe 7, 8 years, the word energy transition and green and renewable and all these words and trends have become really a super hot topic, as I'm sure everyone knows. Initially, I think money has flowed into investment firms, etc., and funds to deploy it in the space of renewables and energy transition and so on.
Yeah.
But what we're not seeing so much on the ground is the sort of the actual projects being developed to meet the availability of projects to meet that capital. So, for example, a pension fund will put down a certain amount of capital, hundreds of millions of dollars to be invested in renewables projects. Um, but oftentimes what you see on the other side is that the amount of projects that are available don't meet that amount of money, essentially. So there's more money available often than there is good projects. So as time goes on, the global energy transition is changing shape as well.
Yeah.
Particularly right now, as we're talking, things have had a bit of a shift. I mean, until a few months ago, the idea of doing new gas projects and so on and nuclear projects, etc., was totally off the table. But as we speak, nuclear is a topic again that people are
Yeah.
speaking about, even in Asia. LNG to power projects are coming back into consideration as a form of transition fuel until we are ready to really switch over to renewables fully. The discussion about hydrogen, which has been in the news for the last 3, 4, 5 years, that discussion seems to be losing steam big time.
Yeah.
So it's a very fast moving space, and what the global energy transition is, to be honest with you, Vadim,
Hmm.
I'm not sure that anyone really knows at this point in time. I think everyone's desperately trying to find an answer. But at this point in time, I don't think there's any clear path. So I'd say that the point about it in general is just to sort of stay dynamic and stay up to trends and see where it goes. I'm fortunate in being a lawyer in the energy space. We help our clients do what they want to do rather than having to decide which direction we need to go in. So in that sense, my job is maybe a little bit easier than being a power developer or whatever who has to decide, what energy source is the next big one, which one is the one worth pushing for. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see where we go with this.
That's very interesting. And looking back, what is the proudest moment in your career?
Proudest moment in my career.
Mm.
Geez, that's a tough one. Um, ah, I don't know. I don't know, Vadim. Proudest moment in my career. Um, I think I must say just sort of having when I qualified finally as a
Hmm.
lawyer must have been the proudest moment in 2020 when I did my New York bar exam and then got admitted as an attorney in New York. I think that must have been the proudest moment. But since then, of course, your day-to-day career and the kind of projects that you work on and the clients you get to help, etc. I think it can be very rewarding as you go. But there's no like a big hooray moment,
Yeah.
I would say. But it's generally rewarding.
Interesting. That's great. And what advice do you have for students who are aspiring to be energy lawyers?
Um, I would say that if you're really interested in going specifically into the area of energy law, or to be honest, project development, project finance is what we call it in the industry. If you're really interested in going into that area of law, really do your research well on which law firms practice in that area. Um, a lot of law firms have a good brand, and some of the law firms with the best brands are not necessarily the best law firms in the energy space.
Hmm.
So when first step is really just um, acquainting yourself with who are the players in the energy legal space. And then second of all, I would really encourage you to take a deep dive into the topics like project finance and project development, construction law. You don't need to become an expert, but you just need to know what it is.
Hmm.
To be honest with you, when I first went into project finance and energy law, I didn't even know what it was. I had like a vague idea that I wanted to do energy projects, but I didn't really know what it is to do project finance.
Yeah.
So if I just had someone at that point in time tell me like, oh, by the way, what you're interested in is called project finance, you should probably just read a book about that. it would have been a huge help. So I think first of all, if you want to get interested in energy law, just figure out what it is. Get yourself a good book on project finance. Read it page to page from front to the back.
Yeah.
Find out who are the good law firms and go talk to them. You'd already be way ahead of most applicants if you just know what it is that you're actually applying for in the first place.
And would you say networking is important in your industry?
I think networking is important in every single industry.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is that I haven't, except for my first job, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't had a single job that I did not get through networking after
Mm-hmm.
that. Every other role that I've had in the last 7 years came as a result of knowing someone,
Mm-hmm.
either in a different firm or different company. So I would say networking is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good enough to get high grades and then just send out your CV. That's just not going to get you across the line. If you, as we were saying earlier in the beginning of this conversation, when you hit that bottleneck when everyone's applying for the same
Mm-hmm.
positions, there are 10 positions at this law firm and everyone's applying for the same positions. What's really important in that scenario is everyone has good grades, everyone can speak well, everyone's presentable. What makes you different? What
Mm-hmm.
makes you different? And what makes you different really is have you done that extra work that I just mentioned earlier? And the other one is, have you made a point of sort of networking with people in the industry
Mm-hmm.
to understand where the opportunities are and where they aren't? That little bit of extra knowledge that you get from talking to people in industry will make a big difference ultimately when you're having an interview to discuss a position.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And two last questions. Are there any books or podcasts that you would recommend? Maybe non-legal ones, maybe something that motivates you or inspires you. But are there any?
Mm. To be honest with you, I don't think I wouldn't say something specific along the lines of motivation or anything of that sort. But what I would say is, if you have a passion or an interest in something, and I know this sounds like a cliche, but if you have a passion or interest in a field, whatever that might
Mhm.
be, you know, just desperately pursue that. Right now, for example, AI and all these things is all the rage. I'm just religiously consuming AI podcasts and things at the
Yeah.
moment, because that's where I feel that things are heading and things are
Mhm.
changing. Um, I don't think there's any sort of I don't think there's any silver bullet in terms of books for motivation or
Mhm.
career planning or anything of that sort. Although I must say, actually, having said that, and you said not specifically for lawyers, but maybe this one it's aimed at lawyers, but it's maybe not specific to lawyers. It was called Satan's Advice for Young Lawyers.
Mhm.
Um, it's a book basically about telling you the real truths of what legal practice looks like and what life in to be honest with you in any company looks like
Mhm.
in practice. That was of particular interest. But otherwise, I would just say read what you're interested in, read broadly. Don't narrow yourself down in a particular area. If you do have an interest in something, go into it deeply. But always keep an eye out for other things that take your fancy, and just keep on learning things.
That's a great advice. And the last question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say before you dive into any career or whatever, which as I did, is make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Just
Mhm.
just actually take. If I just took the time
Yeah.
to read into and research into what it is I was actually trying to do or what I wanted to do,
Mhm.
rather than just running in a direction without thinking. Honestly, I think it would make things a lot simpler. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the journey is kind of important as well. But
Mhm.
if I could give myself advice, I would say it's just sort of take a moment to think about what it is that you really want to go do. Find people in the market or in LinkedIn or wherever that
Mhm.
are doing what you think you want to do, and go and talk to them.
Yeah.
Find out what it is, and then you can sort of set your course from there.